Hey everybody, I'm Chuck Esposito. He's Jason McCormick. We're here for a Tuesday special of Bookends. Usually we're here on every Monday. And this week and next week it'll be Tuesdays, but it's fun, Jay. I mean, not only do we have the hockey right now in the conference finals, we've got basketball in the semifinals, but it's football week. I mean, yay sportsbooks, right? It's great. Kickoff week, you've got a phenomenal game on Thursday night. It's the defending champs, the Kansas City Chiefs, against the Houston Texans. These teams have a little bit of history, twice last year, once during the regular season, and of course they met in the playoffs. Both times the Texans scored 31 points. They won one, they lost one. Both games were kind of a shootout. Should be fun. I can't wait for Thursday night.
Well, it's the highest total on the betting board this week at 55 points. You have to be excited as a Texans fan to hear that they scored 31 points in both games. That would bode well
Usually it's
for
pretty
your
good,
team.
yep.
Unfortunately, the Chiefs put up 51 in that playoff game. They were able to control the clock, kind of keep Mahomes off the field in that game one. Carlos Hyde had a big game for them, and I think that's what they're going to be looking to do again on Thursday night with their new running back, David Johnson, who they acquired from Arizona. Maybe try and run the ball. Obviously, they gave a ton of money to Deshaun Watson and his counterpart, his favorite receiver.
Both quarterbacks actually got big contracts in the offseason, Mahomes and Watson.
His big receiver, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, was shipped to Arizona, and he got paid big money today as well. So we'll see what he does later in the week. But without his superstar receiver, he still got Fuller. They pick up Brandon Cooks. They acquire Randall Cobb, and they get David Johnson. So they've got some new pieces of that offense, and it's going to be a big part of that game to see if they can kind of match wits with Mahomes and his new toy, obviously, with the Williams holding out. We're going to see the LSU running back, Hilaire, kind of take over the game in the run game for the Chiefs. But again, all the weapons that the Chiefs had, and I expect, again, unfortunately, the scoreboard to be lit up in this game on Thursday night.
Yeah, unfortunately, we'll be rooting for the under, I'm sure, that night. But you're right. It's a great way to kick the season off. I think you look at Watson without Hopkins. I'm kind of anxious to see how he plays without that guy. I mean, I know he's got Will Fuller, and if Fuller's healthy, he's a dynamic wideout. They added David Johnson. So we'll have to wait and see. But it's a great way to kick the season off when you've got the defending champs. And, Arrowhead, I think, is going to be one of the few stadiums that actually is going to have some fans. I think Dallas is going to have some as well. Both Florida teams, Jacksonville and Miami will have some fans as well. Everybody else is kind of a no, with a few teams like maybe after the first couple of weeks we'll have some fans. But so you will see a few in Arrowhead on Thursday night. After that, we're going to look at the rest of the slate. We're going to jump to another game that's in the AFC East, the Jets, and a team that everybody really likes right now, and they're talking about are they going to dethrone the Patriots? And that's the Buffalo Bills, who added Stephon Diggs in the offseason.
Yeah, I think the last time the Buffalo Bills were relevant was Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas.
Machine Gun Kelly, Andre Reed.
But obviously, Tom Brady leaving that division leaves it open for potentially the Bills to regain that division. And they've got an outstanding defense. They acquire Diggs. They pick up Zach Moss, rookie running back out of Utah, to go with Singletary. It's really going to be on Josh Allen, though, as well as he can be. These teams played both, obviously, 2 times last year. They split, but both games were very, very low-scoring game. I think it was a 33-point total and a 19-point total. So that's why this is the lowest total. So we go from the highest total on the board to the lowest total on the board with a total of 39. Again, should be 2 good defenses. The Jets don't have, Le'Veon Bell, Crowder, Brandon Perryman is a receiver that they've got there to kind of replace Robbie Anderson, who went to Carolina. So not a huge amount of offensive threats from either team. I wouldn't surprise to see kind of a ground game, kind of run it down type game, and that's why that you see that 39 total.
Yeah, I think in both teams, both young quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Sam Darnold for the Jets, I think Allen is the key to the Bills. As you mentioned, he has to take that next step. They've kind of surrounded him with some weapons now. I mean, you look at those wide receivers with Diggs and Cole Beasley and Brown. I mean, they've got some talented guys there, but really it's up to Josh Allen. And we talked about some offensive guys who are getting new contracts, and Tre'Davious White got a big contract from the Bills as well. So they are. I think they're poised to be that kind of vogue team that everyone's backing right now. They like him in week 1. They like him to win that division. We'll see if they can live up to that billing or not.
You talk about from a defensive standpoint in the NFL, you talk about the Niners or the Steelers being, that best defensive team. I I actually think it's this Bills team that'll be the number one defense in the National Football League at the end of the year. Again, in the division,
play the Jets
with the
and
Jets
Dolphins
twice.
Right.
The Dolphins are going to put up some points, and we don't know really what the Patriots are going to be, but they've got 6 games that they're going to put up some incredible defensive stats, and that defense is loaded. They've got a great secondary. They've got a great pass rush. So I think that won't be surprised at all to see the Bills do really well on the defensive side of the football.
Well, now we're going to jump from the AFC to the NFC North, and it's a game that both these teams made the playoffs last year. The Packers lost in the championship game against the 49ers. Vikings, who we just talked about losing Stephon Diggs to the Bills, but it's Vikings and Packers. I mean, what a way to kick off that division week 1 with a very small favorite in this game.
The Vikings are a small favorite. The Vikings actually lost this game both times last year. Packers were able to knock them off. Obviously, the Packers were 13-3. Kind of ran through their schedule. Good Aaron Jones, Davonte Adams. They've got all the threats. It's really going to see what they can do on the defensive side of the ball against Dalvin Cook. We saw them late in the season. The 49ers ran right through them. I think they only threw 8 passes in that playoff game. The Niners basically said, hey, we're coming at you. We're going to try and run through you. And Minnesota kind of has that same mentality. With losing Stephon Diggs, Kirk Cousins wants to turn around, hand that ball off to Dalvin Cook as many times as he can, and then essentially set up the play action pass. So this is a huge divisional matchup. Both these teams, big playoff aspirations coming out of the box.
Yeah, I think you look at the NFC North, and for me, I think it's one of the toughest divisions in football. I think the Bears are improved, even though we'll talk about their quarterback situation. I think the Lions are improved, too. So I think it's an interesting division, and it's a big game to kick it off. Now we'll look at a game in the NFC East, and that's the Washington football team against the Philadelphia Eagles. It's strange saying the Washington football team. There's probably not a team that's more banged up coming out of camp and with no preseason than the Philadelphia Eagles. Jeffrey's rumored to be traded. Miles Sanders has been banged up. Their offensive line, Reagor, their receiver they drafted early from TCU, is hurt. So you have to hope that you've got a healthy Deshaun Jackson to go with Carson Wentz. But I think similar to Buffalo, this Redskin team has a really, really good young defense. Of course, they drafted Chase Young. Ron Rivera's there as head coach right now. They just let Adrian Peterson go. So it's kind of a youth movement a little bit on offense with Dwayne Haskins. They're the underdog here, not quite a touchdown. But what do you think about this game?
Well, I think you said it. The key is who are we going to see on the field for the Eagles? Again, from a specialty position, their wide receivers all banged up. Miles Sanders a question mark. Ertz a question mark. But Wentz has got it done against this Washington team both times last year. They scored 32 points and 37 points in both their respective games. And Washington was competitive on the other side of the ball with 27 points both ways. So these games last year were very, very high-scoring games. We're going to get to see a new call it weapon for Washington and Antonio Gibson, right. The running back out of Memphis. Obviously, they were able to let Adrian Peterson go, and Detroit picked him up. But like you said, Washington's got that youth movement, and Ron Rivera has compared this running back that he has to Christian McCaffrey, who obviously number one running back in football by all regards. So I'm excited to see this kid on the field and see how they use him and what they can do. But again, I think this game's going to come down to who actually is on the field for the Eagles.
I think Bryce Love, too. He's healthy now, and I think that adds another mix, but very young team. The guy I really like on that Washington offense is Terry McLaurin. I mean, this kid, with what he had last year to work with, he was phenomenal. He stretches the field. I think he's a good young wideout for Dwayne Haskins.
They've got a lot of young pieces to put together. So Washington, in a rebuilding, but they've got some pieces to continue to build on.
I think with a young quarterback, too, they need Haskins to kind of take that next step. Now we're going to jump back to the AFC North, Browns-Ravens. Many people think that the Ravens are the team that can win it all. They went out and, they've improved that defense in the offseason. They drafted J.K. Dobbins so they can just pound the rock with Lamar Jackson. I think Marquise Brown takes the next step, has a big year. And on the other side, the Cleveland Browns, the team that was that Vogue team last year. Everybody loved the Browns. We had more tickets on the Browns and more liability for them to win the AFC and to win the championship than any other team, and it didn't pan out for them. Baker Mayfield didn't have a good season. Odell Beckham, he was Odell Beckham. Same thing. They go out and they add Austin Hooper. They've improved that team somewhat, giving him another weapon. It wasn't a good year for Cleveland last year, but one of the bright spots, they went into Baltimore and won 40-25 and won convincingly. Yep. This is week 1. It's in Baltimore. Baltimore's more than a touchdown favorite, and I think it's a big game for both teams, maybe more so for Cleveland to get off on the right foot this year.
Well, I mean, obviously they would love to come out here with a win in a divisional game to start the season and beat, obviously one of the 2 favorites in the AFC. I think from the standpoint of Chubb and Hunt, they do have that pieces in the ground game to control the clock, try and keep Lamar Jackson, try and keep that offense off the field to keep this a potentially a low-scoring game. But I don't know if Cleveland wants to play that way. I think that they
not with the pieces they have.
They want to try and score. They want to try and throw the ball around. This is an interesting matchup because this game, like you said, they won 40-25, and they've got that 2-headed running back with Chubb and Hunt.
They just signed Kareem Hunt today, too, to a 2-year extension. So, they've really locked up those pieces, I think, on offense.
Unfortunately, I think the Ravens are going to play with a monster chip on their shoulder. We said it, last year as they got knocked out of the playoffs that this team's going to return with a vengeance, and Lamar Jackson is going to add to his game, from a running and passing standpoint. He's only going to get better in the passing game, and it's going to be real scary when things start to click for him in the passing game.
Well, I think the one knock right now would be, as phenomenal as Jackson has been, is he still hasn't won a postseason game yet. So that's the next step. No matter how dominant they are in the regular season and where they end up, it's can he win a postseason game? I think that's going to be the key for him.
Yep.
We're going to stay in the AFC, and it's Colts and Jags. I mean, it's tough to talk about the Jags, yet we've seen action on the Jags, and that number has started to come down over the last day or so. On the other side, the Colts go out and they sign Phillip Rivers. They reunite him with Frank Reich. They draft Jonathan Taylor. They add some pieces there with that offensive line. The one thing with Rivers last year, I thought he lost it. I mean, he did not look good. He was uncomfortable in the pocket, but that offensive line was bottom 5. He goes to the top offensive line in football right now. If they give Rivers more time, can he kind of find it again and lead that young team to the next level?
Yeah, again, a divisional matchup. These teams split last year in the matchup. Getting Rivers is huge. I think a healthy T.Y.
Right.
I think a healthy T.Y. Hilton is one of the bigger things of that team. Again, another 2-headed monster in the backfield. Mack and Taylor could be a ground and pound, and not a whole lot on Rivers' arm might be necessary. The Jaguars, we've seen kind of a evacuation of players there. It's going to come down to...
I like that word, an evacuation of players.
We're going to come down to see what Minshew can do and slinging around at DJ Chalk and some of these other guys. They're going to have to...
Conley, D.D. Westbrook, and they drafted Chanot, who's from Colorado, who's a very talented young wideout.
They're going to have to score to stay in games because I just don't see that defense stopping too many plays.
Right. We're going to stay in the AFC now, and we're going to talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Yep, I said it. Week 1, Las Vegas Raiders. They travel on the road to play Carolina, and a new coach there in Rule. Teddy Bridgewater is the quarterback there. And this is kind of the game that's moved the most. We've seen the number jump a full 2 points in favor of the Raiders. They're a favorite on the road right now against a very young defensive Carolina team. And, we don't know. It might be similar to what we experienced with the Knights, where you just get such a bias in bettors that regardless of what the number is, they're going to back the Vegas team. And we don't know how good the Raiders will be. They're in a tough division with the Chiefs, the Chargers, and Broncos, who are all improved. But it's going to be fun to watch them. It's a shame that, there won't be any fans at the stadium this year so we can go out and watch. But Raiders are a road favorite in Carolina. I like Carolina's pieces on offense. McCaffrey, as you said, Samuel, DJ Moore. They added Robbie Anderson. But defensively, they're starting 4 rookies on a very young team, and I think that's why the number has jumped a few points.
Yeah, I think that the Raiders are in a good spot here. I mean, it's not, you call it, going to Carolina, opening up on the road with a rookie head coach with a lot of offensive weapons that he has. So I think that Carolina with Teddy Bridgewater and those offensive weapons can score, but I think the Raiders' defense is much improved, and I think the Raiders could put up a big number here. I think Josh Jacobs going to have a good game in the running game, and some younger pieces.
We'll be rooting for Carolina.
I think Waller, the tight end, we talk about Kelsey and Kittle being the top tight ends in the league. I think that at the end of this year, you might be talking about Darren Waller being the best tight end in the National Football League.
Very talented. He had a great season last year. And then they added Ruggs as a wide receiver, so you kind of have that deep threat now to take the top off a little bit. I'm kind of anxious to see how that offense plays. I know we've talked about other quarterbacks in the league, but for me, I think Carr has some most pressure on him. I really think that this is a year that they've surrounded him with a good cast. He has to take that next step with John Gruden. So we'll see how that plays out. We're going to jump back to the NFC right now. NFC North, we talked about Vikings, Packers playing. This is Bears-Lions. We're both from Chicago, big Bears fans. I don't think it's a big surprise that Mitchell Trubisky won that battle. Statistically, he's 3-0 in his career against the Lions. The Bears have won the last 4 games against the Lions. He's had great numbers when he plays the Lions, I think. And if you're the Bears, you wanted him to win that battle. You invested a number 2 pick in him. You traded up for that. I think he's the key. He's got the bigger arm. He's more mobile. But, of course, Nick Foles has won a Super Bowl with the Eagles. Can the Bears' defense get back to where they were? Khalil Mack had a little bit of a down year. David Montgomery's banged up. Allen Robinson is in a contract year. But really the key to the Bears is Mitchell Trubisky. Can he take the next step and lead that team to the postseason? Again, for me, I think that division from top to bottom is interchangeable. I think it's one of the best divisions in football, the NFC North.
Well, we talk about Trubisky, and again, he's had some success against Detroit. Putting up some decent stats, and most importantly, getting wins. For the Bears, obviously beating Detroit last year twice, got to kind of wonder if you just have to throw those things out, because Detroit was without Matt Stafford in both those games, and Jeff Driscoll and David Blah just didn't get it done. And when you have offensive weapons like Galladay and Jones, having that quarterback that can sling that ball around is so very important. And they haven't had health on the running back side of things as well. And Matt Patricia, the defensive schemes that he's wanted to put in just haven't been there as well. I think that in particular, this matchup between Nagy and Patricia from a head coach standpoint, there's starting to be a lot of pressure on both of those guys. If these teams don't come out this year with a winning record, I think we could see some changes in both of those head coaching positions.
Yeah, I think the Bears have had more success. I think when Nagy got the job, if anybody would have told us that they'd be 20-12 at the end of his first 2 seasons, that's outstanding. But I think expectations were so high after that 12-4 year that they have taken a step back. They're still a very young team as well. I think defensively they're going to have to really step up. And you talk about the Lions running game. They drafted DeAndre Swift to go with Kerryon Johnson. They just signed AP. And you look at what, as you mentioned, you look at what numbers Stafford had. He was slinging it before he got hurt. They should have beaten the Chiefs if not for a bad turnover. That first game against the Cardinals, it was a tie, but they were in control of that game. So they're a very good team. I think offensively, T.J. Hawkinson at tight end, as you mentioned, with Galladay and Marvin Jones, they've got the pieces in place for Matt Stafford to have a big year.
I think they were 2-0-1 in their first 3 games last year, and ended the season with 3 wins. So I mean, the wheels really fell off for them at the end of the season, and I think that there's got to be some optimism coming back as long as Matt Stafford's healthy.
Now we're going to jump to kind of an interconference game where you've got the Seahawks and the Falcons. Or I'm sorry, it's an NFC game. Seahawks and Falcons both playing each other. Seahawks come into this game as a road favorite. Atlanta finished the year really strong last year. Everybody thought that Quinn would probably be out. They'd make a coaching change there. The team played so well down the stretch to kind of save his job. And I think you look at them offensively, and it's Matt Ryan and Julio Jones and Ridley. They lose Austin Hooper, but they get Hayden Hurst from Baltimore to help in that role. Their big offseason acquisition, though, was Todd Gurley to replace Davonte Freeman. I don't know how good Gurley will be in that setup. I mean, he had a down year last year. Defensively, they have to play better. But they're hoping that Gurley returns to where he was 2 years ago. For me, it's defense for them. They've addressed the defense via free agency and the draft. They have to improve there. On the other side, God, it's all Russell Wilson. I mean, you can make a case that every year he's up there for MVP. If you can turn this guy loose early in the game, he's scrambling around. It's more schoolyard than anything else, but they add DK Metcalf. You've got Lockett. Carson should be back healthy. That's a dynamic offense with the pieces he has there, but it all goes through Russell Wilson.
Well, and the one big thing for Seattle is they wanted to get back to that vaunted defense, and they added really 2 key pieces on the back end, Jamal Adams and Quentin Dunbar in that secondary. This is probably the best matchup of week 1, really. I think you've got 2 teams that really have playoff aspirations.
Absolutely.
2 incredible quarterbacks, 2 really good offenses. And it's going. This game could potentially lead us to who's making the playoffs and who's not.
Right, I agree. I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. Now we're going to look at the Chargers and the Bengals. And I think it's an interesting matchup because the Chargers move on from Phillip Rivers. Tyrod Taylor is going to get the start there. for me, I look at those pieces on offense. If it's Austin Eckler or if it's Hunter Henry or Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, they've got the pieces there. And on defense with Ingram and Bosa, they're a team that should be much better than what they are. They're a road favorite here in Cincinnati, and let the Joe Burrow era begin. I mean, we know what he did at LSU and how he played there. They just locked up Joe Mixon. They've got some young wideouts in Boyd and Ross. They're hoping for a healthy A.J. Green. This is kind of one of the more intriguing matchups to me on the board.
Yeah, and again, said it. Who everybody wants to see Joe Burrow. This is his coming out party, right. A home game where they're a dog. The Chargers with Tyrod Taylor, you start to ask some questions. They've got a lot of pieces around him that can be successful. A great receiver in Keenan Allen, but what does he bring to that offense? What do they run with that offense? And you're asking essentially the same questions on the Cincinnati side of the ball, but I think that we know what they're going to try and do with Burrow, stretch things out, and they're going to use Mixon as much as possible, both running the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield. And Burrow's going to bring some interesting college aspect plays. I think Cincinnati might be
from that area,
yeah.
So he's
that's another really, really good game. But you start to wonder, how far can this Charger team go with Tyrod Taylor? They've got some good players around him, but how far can he take them?
Well, it's an interesting question because they drafted Justin Herbert out of Oregon in the first round. So he's somebody that early in the season, if Taylor is struggling, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go to another rookie quarterback, and he gets a lot of playing time this year. But you're right, they've got a great offense.
I won't be surprised at all if we see that line come down and we see a lot of Cincinnati Bengal money line play on Sunday.
Can you remember when the last time you said that? When we see a lot of Cincinnati
not.
Bengal money
but
line
there's that excitement for Burrow,
right.
and that's what they brought him in there for, and that's what's going to hopefully rejuvenate the Bengal team.
Another game now in the NFC, it's the Cardinals and 49ers. And you can make a case that the Cardinals are kind of that fun vogue team right now. The way they finished last year, what Kyler Murray was able to accomplish. They go out, and as you alluded to earlier, they make that big trade. I think it was a stunner for all of us. But you had DeAndre Hopkins, who just got a new deal today as well. And you add Hopkins to the mix with Fitzgerald and some of the other young wideouts. They have Christian Kirk. And they picked up Kenyon Drake last year, who finished really strong. They're a fun team to watch. They have a dynamic offense. I think they take the next step there. They're going to score a lot of points. The Niners, how close to winning it all? They're a really good team. They love to smash the ball and run it. If it's Coleman, Mostard, McKinnon's healthy now. You've got Kittle at tight end, but their wide receiver core is just depleted right now. So they're going to rely on that defense and running the ball, but I think it's up to Jimmy G. I think you need Jimmy G to take the next step as well to get the 49ers back to that NFC Championship game.
The Niners beat them both times last year. One of the games was really competitive, I think a 28-25, and then the other game they won by 10. I think the big difference in this game is you have all these weapons for the Cardinals, but their question mark is that offensive line, and they're going up against arguably one of the best defensive lines coming right out of the box with that pass rush. So that'll be the key to this game. Can they protect Murray? Can they keep him from having to scramble around, give him the time to be able to get the ball to a guy like Hopkins and Fitzgerald? And they weren't able to do that a whole lot last year, and like you said, the Niners want to run that ball. They're going to potentially have a three-headed monster to be able to shuffle guys in there with McKinnon making his be able to come back to go along with Coleman and Mostert. I think that this could be an interesting game if Arizona is able to protect Murray and give him some time in the pocket.
Right. We've seen this number come down a little bit too. So you're talking about both Arizona and Cincinnati getting some early dog play so far. This next game to me is the marquee game of the week. It's my favorite game to watch, and it's Tampa Bay. It's Tom Brady in Tampa Bay. He's wearing the creamsicle. It's hard to believe that he's not in New England. You talk about him moving teams, but I think the big piece for him was that you've got Bruce Arians there, and you talk about the wide receivers that he has. If it's Mike Evans, if it's Godwin, I think we talked about with Scotty Miller. They go out and they pick up Fournette. You've got Jones. You add Gronk,
Howard, Cameron
O.J.
Brate.
Howard. That offense is unbelievable. He is 43. That offensive line is a little bit suspect, so he figures to get hit a little bit more. But when you talk about those weapons, it's crazy. On the other side, you know Drew Brees wants another shot at a ring. And now you've got Brady and Brees in the same division. They go out and pick up Emmanuel Sanders to go along with Michael Thomas. Very dynamic offense, too. Kamara's on the verge of a new contract. I think both these two offenses are going to be fun to watch. And you're going to see some Tampa money come in here, too.
Yeah, and these are some talented defenses as well. Tampa's continuing to improve on the defensive side of the ball. The Saints, that's really was the strength of their team. Outside of having all those offensive weapons, their defense is really what led them to be able to get to the playoffs and do so well. 43 years old Tom Brady, 41-year-old Drew Brees. I don't know that we've ever seen a game in the NFL with two 40-plus quarterbacks going head-to-head and expecting a shootout-type game with the way these guys are still playing.
They've got some weapons, that's for sure.
So, obviously this is going to be a marquee game in the afternoon for everybody to watch and see what Brady can bring. I drafted Tom Brady in my fantasy league.
I love it.
Not that I'm a big Chris Godwin and Mike Evans fans, right. And to have Howard and Brate and you rattled those guys off. It's just too many weapons. I see Brady having a lot of success. We'll see if the defense can hold up. And lead to wins for them.
I think when Arians got to Arizona, he inherited a 39-year-old Carson Palmer. And Palmer put up some huge numbers as well, as an aging quarterback under Arians' system. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how it all plays out.
We saw Winston put up monster numbers last year. If he could just make probably 15 throws to his guys instead of the other guy in the other jerseys, they would have been that much better. I think he almost had 20-plus interceptions last year.
Think about the first and second pick in 2015 were Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. They're both backup quarterbacks this year, and you've got a 43 and a 41-year-old guy starting in this game. So now we're going to turn to the Sunday night game, which I think is a marquee game too. It's the Dallas Cowboys as road favorites in the new SoFi Stadium against the Rams. Now, both these teams have playoff aspirations. I think the Rams have taken a step back a little bit, in my opinion. But I think you look at the Cowboys, and for me, I think you can make a case that they're the best team in the NFC. They had Mike McCarthy as head coach. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. They draft CeeDee Lamb. You got Lamb, Michael Gallup, and Amari Cooper. Prescott still doesn't have a long-term deal. He's playing on a franchise tag again. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they play this game. Remember last year that 2/3 of Prescott's wins came against teams with below a 500 record. So he's playing a good team now on the road. I think he has to take that next step too. But I think this is a great matchup. And my guess is we're going to be Ram fans when this game kicks on Sunday night.
I'm 100% positive we're going to be needing the Rams on our side of the counter. And I think the biggest move of the NFL offseason was Mike McCarthy to the Dallas Cowboys. I think that he's been sitting around for 2 years after leaving the Packers, just waiting for his opportunity. He's found the right team. He's found a team that's got all the offensive pieces, and Dak Prescott. We talk about Lamar Jackson having a chip on his shoulder after losing. Dak Prescott's got a chip on his shoulder after not getting paid. And I think he's going to come out this year each and every game with that motivation, and I think the Dallas Cowboys are going to be a very, very scary team.
That's probably a quarterback to target on your fantasy teams, too. I mean, he definitely has a chip on his shoulder. So now we kind of got through Thursday. We've got through Sunday. And I love opening Monday night. I wish it was like this all the time.
With the doubleheader?
It's a doubleheader. I love the doubleheaders. I think it's great. I think it's so much fun. The early game, you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers against the New York Giants. And it's the Steelers with Big Ben back. We know the struggles they had last year. They still finished 8-8. Tomlin still never had a losing season. But they haven't made the playoffs in 3 years. So Big Ben's back. You expect Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, they go out and they add Eric Ebron to have a resurgence. We know that defense is really good. On the flip side, Danny Dimes had his ups and downs last year, Daniel Jones at quarterback. But he never had a full game with Shepard and Slayton and Ingram and Barkley. Yet he still was a top 10 quarterback over the last 8 weeks of the season last year. This number has really jumped up. We talked about that Raiders game. You've seen a dramatic move here, too, in favor of the Steelers. Not a touchdown yet, but kind of trending in that direction. I think it's an interesting matchup for both these two teams, especially the Steelers' Big Ben and how he comes back with that offense.
Well, I think we talked about it comparing the last 8 weeks of the season last year that Jones's stats were very similar to Mahomes.
Yep.
And getting all these guys back, I think one of the keys is having a healthy tight end in Evan Ingram to go with Slayton and Shepard and Barkley. I mean, that offense is going to be good. They've always, again, just not been very good on the back end and defense with the Giants.
Offensive line has some struggles too.
Yep.
But yep.
And the Steelers, it's just how does no preseason, limited training camp, all that stuff out there. Obviously, you have a veteran in Ben Roethlisberger that's not going to have to study a game plan. He can flat out go back and play. But how does his body react? Does it take a little bit of time? Is there a little bit of rust that's there? And the same can be said for a Connor and a Smith-Schuster. Those guys were banged up last year. So, are they going to be able to hit the ground running? Whereas I think the Giants, it seems like this team is much younger, maybe a little bit of a hunger there. I'm surprised they're this much of a dog. I'm surprised the move has been on the Steelers. I think that the Giants could be a sleepy pick come Monday.
New coach, too, with Judge for the Giants. I think you look at the Steelers, and it's not just about Connor and Big Ben and Smith-Schuster. They've got Deontay Johnson, they've got James Washington, and then they drafted Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame, who's been getting raves so far in camp. So he's got a lot more weapons right now. But I think his health's the key because he plays kind of that reckless style. So how is he going to take that first hit, especially on that arm?
Yeah, and I brought up Buffalo as that I think that they're going to make that leap to the top defensive team. This Steeler defense is really, really good. They cause a lot of turnovers. They cause a lot of havoc. They're going to be back up there again as one of the top defenses, and that's why I think where this movement is that respecting that defensive team for the Steelers.
And then the late cap that night, the final game for Week 1 is the Tennessee Titans at the Denver Broncos. Kind of an intriguing matchup.
Era begins.
Drew Lock, they've added a lot of pieces there for him. Jerry Jeudy, Falker, they have a lot of young pieces there. Melvin Gordon, they have a good defense as well. On the other side, you've got Tennessee. I mean, the big signing over the weekend, Jadeveon Clowney. I think it kind of came out of left field a little bit that he ended up there. They signed Stephen Gostkowski as a kicker now. I think the big question there is, can Ryan Tannehill play like he did last year? Can he be that quarterback that can lead him to the postseason? Defensively, they're good. Arguably maybe the best running back in the league in Henry, who just can dominate, control the clock, which they did in the postseason. But I think the key is Ryan Tannehill there. That number's kind of come down to a round pick. I think you're going to see a late surge of Tennessee money come in. My guess is we'll need Denver when they kick. But so far it's been kind of two-way.
Well, a lot more questions on the Denver side of the ball, both offensive and defensively, with Drew Lock starting, bring in Melvin Gordon, what's going to be the rotation there with him and Phillip Lindsay, some young receivers to mix in with Cortland Sutton. I think one thing that might come into play in this game is the weather.
Right.
I heard today it was going to snow in Denver. They went from a 94-degree temperature to now snowing. So we'll have to check out and see what the weather's going to look like on Monday night.
I would love it if we went from
early
90
in
degree.
September.
I'd love it if we went from 90 degree to snowing. But it's we're happy that it's in the 80s today, so it's not too bad.
With 60-mile-an-hour winds.
Right. We've kind of finished off the football side. Now we're going to talk about two leagues that are in their postseason. First, we're going to touch on basketball. It's been a little surprising, I think, in the Eastern Conference, especially with Miami up 3-1 in that series. We know that Giannis has been banged up. He didn't finish the last game, yet Milwaukee won that game. He says he's a game-time decision. That's the key there. But really kind of disappointed, I think, for me, the way Milwaukee's played so far in the postseason. And then Boston in the Eastern Conference is up 3-2 against Toronto. Toronto just got blown out yesterday. Ibaka's in a walking boot right now. Not sure if he's going to play or not. I think a lot of us thought it was going to be Milwaukee and Toronto in the Eastern Conference Final, and it looks like it's going to be Miami and Boston.
Well, definitely, if you would have asked me a week ago what I thought, I would have told you Milwaukee and Toronto. I don't think that Toronto series is over yet. I mean, Boston did give them a Beantown beatdown yesterday.
We were watching that game together. It was like 18-4 before you even
They couldn't make a bucket to save their lives, and Boston just finished them off. I think Toronto's too good of a team to go away quietly. I won't be surprised at all if we see a Game 7 in that series. Miami just has kind of run through Milwaukee with no Giannis. Middleton was able to really have an incredible second half of that game. I just don't know Miami actually, and I said it 2 weeks ago. I didn't think Miami was the bottom of that of those four teams. But man, Jimmy Butler and that team have really come out to play. I think that they'll finish Milwaukee off, and then it's going to be an interesting matchup. If they continue to play at this high level, I think both Toronto and Boston are better than them, but it could be an interesting series.
Yep, I agree. Now we're going to turn out west. I think we've said this all along since the whole bubble started, that we expected it to be an LA final where you're going to see Clippers-Lakers. Clippers are up 2-1 right now. After that first round, I think they've started to play more Clipper basketball. They've gotten healthy. That defense has played better. They just look like the better team. I think they're going to win that series in 5.
They play quarters of Clipper basketball. they decide when they want to turn the defense on, and then they kind of go about things. They had a down 10 to 12 points in the second quarter yesterday, and then right before halftime, they're able to get the game to a 2-point game by turning that defense on. They did it in the fourth quarter again last night.
But I think that's a sign of a good team when you can turn up the defensive intensity.
Yeah, and
when
they're
you
the
have
one,
to, because some teams can't play on that side of the court.
They can score points at any time, but when they want to play good defense, the other team's in trouble.
Right, and then I think you look at the Lakers. They get blown out in the first game against the Rockets. They have the big lead in game 2. The Rockets come back and get the lead, and then the Lakers win that game. So I still think that's going to be a longer series. I could see that one going 6 or 7. I think the Clippers close it out in 5, but I still expect it to be Lakers-Clippers in the Western Conference Final.
I'm not so sure on the Lakers. I think the Rockets can steal this series. We saw them get down big, be able to make that run. I think if Russell Westbrook has a better shooting game, they could potentially win game 2. It's got to be about AD and LeBron. Those guys are going to get their 50 to 65 points. But if they don't get any support from anybody else, if Kuzma or Morris aren't able to put up points, the Rockets can score. And they've got 5 or 6 guys that can score. Right? They just can't have that terrible shooting game. And unfortunately, Westbrook did that the other night, and it kind of gave the Lakers just too many possessions. But I think the Rockets are the better team here. Just watching with my eye, I think they're the better team on the floor. They just have to be able to make good decisions. The way that they shoot 3-pointers, you can get so hot and so cold.
Right.
So you have those fluctuations. But I think Houston can play with them, and then I think that they might be in trouble against the Clippers. And the Lakers could easily go out and close this series out. But I think that it's not about LeBron and AD. They've got to get some points from the other supporting cast.
It's definitely been fun with the NBA playoffs right now. Now we're going to switch gears, and we're going to go to hockey. And, I think for us in our backyard, the Vegas Golden Knights, who, going into the bubble were the favorite to win it all, played well in the round-robin round, kind of had some struggles with Chicago, had some struggles with Vancouver, lose the first game to the Stars. I think the big thing is their offense. I know we talked about how many games they played in a short period of time, 3 games in 4 days. They've been shut out twice in their last 2 games. And maybe it wasn't a product of Crawford playing so well or Demko standing on his head. Maybe it's just that offense right now for VGK is really struggling. Yeah,
we talked about Thatcher Demko standing on his head and getting the Vancouver back in that series, and he made 48 saves in the game 6, and the Knights were really all over him in both Game 6 and Game 7, and he was standing there. And we kind of saw a different feel in the Dallas Game 1. The Knights weren't all over Dallas. They really kind of limped through both the first and second period, and then played a better third period. And the players acknowledged, that they just they weren't motivated. They weren't not that they weren't motivated. They just weren't able to get their game going in that first and second period. And I think that was all. You said it. It was 3 games in 4 nights. If you talk to handicappers in hockey during the regular season, they're looking for teams playing 3 games in 4 nights, and they're a dead bet against. So Dallas was able to steal Game 1. I think that this is a volcano that's about to explode with the Knights struggling on offense. I think once they kind of get the balls rolling, we're going to see them put some pucks in the net. And I think kind of like we saw with the Lightning Islanders Game 1, where we saw the Lightning put up an Ocho.
I knew you were waiting for that.
Oh yeah,
I like it.
The Islanders have to stay off the power play or the penalty kill. They cannot put that Lightning team on the power play. They're devastating on the power play. The Islanders don't have enough to overcome it, and that's where the Lightning just blew through them. But I think that the Knights, if they can find a way to get a power play goal or get something early, this could be a snowball into a big number for the Knights.
Well, I think real quickly with the Knights, though, is that Dallas played during the regular season. They didn't give up a lot, and they didn't score a lot. Yet in the bubble, they were one of the highest scoring teams. Yet they kind of went back to that style again, where they kind of clamp down defensive. It's a lot of dump and chase. So I think Vegas kind of has to get through that a little bit and get some goals and open it up. On the other side, as you said, Tampa putting up 8 goals. When you looked at the teams in the bubble, only one team in the Eastern Conference had more points than Tampa, and that was the Washington Capitals. And only one team in the Western Conference had more points than Tampa, and that was St. Louis. So you talk about a team now that really had the most points out of all the teams. They were seeded number 2. They're getting a little bit healthier. They were well rested. This is a dangerous Tampa Bay Lightning team.
I think you said it. That's the key. They're getting healthy. I don't think that they have really had all their guys on the ice at one point in time at 100%, and they do that now. Point is has been absolutely fantastic. And like I said, you cannot put them on the power play. On the power play, the Lightning are going to hurt you.
Yep, they are. So we've touched on basketball, football, hockey, and now we've got baseball, which is starting to wind down a little bit now. You're starting to look at some surprises. I mean, if the playoffs started today, the Miami Marlins would be in the postseason. The Yankees are the 8th seed right now in the American League. They're not healthy. Cole has struggled a little bit, especially pitching-wise. But I think it's going to be fun over the next couple of weeks watching how baseball finishes off. But definitely some surprises. You know, you look out west, both the Dodgers and Padres playing so well. You've got the Cubs and Cardinals battling it out. San Francisco Giants have slipped into a playoff spot now. The Blue Jays have slipped into a playoff spot now. So I like the expanded format, similar to what hockey did. I love what baseball did. It's a shortened season, but I like getting more teams into the postseason.
Yeah, I'm starting to see a little bit of the separation clearly on the bad side of things. I think the Rangers have now won 3 of their last 21 games. Boston continues to struggle. You said it, the Blue Jays have really been the team this week that's really kind of surged and won a bunch of games in a row to kind of get themselves above the Yankees, up there with Tampa. The Blue Jays actually play, I think, 9 of their next 16 games against the Yankees. So this is going to be a big stretch for both of those teams who are kind of battling for that 2 spot in the East. I think the best race in baseball is in the AL Central, where we've got the White Sox, Twins, and Indians all right there. All been fantastic. All have big run differentials in their favor. Those teams are going to be interesting to watch down the stretch. From a betting standpoint, we talked about on last week's show that the Tigers swept out the Twins, and that I was expecting this week to see the Twins react a little revenge on the Tigers, and they went 4-1 versus the Tigers this weekend. And so one of the particular matchups we're looking at this weekend as we approach the weekend, Tampa Bay and Boston, where you've got the top of the East versus the bottom of the East. You're going to get Snell and Glass now going for Tampa, so potentially look for the Tampa Bay Rays to sweep out the Boston Red Sox this weekend.
I mean, it's so much fun for us. I mean, we're talking about all 4 major sports going on at the same time in September. Yay, sports books. I mean, it's terrific. I mean, it's so much fun. But a couple of things. With that said, don't forget, we touched on football, but what does that mean? Last man standing. It's our signature contest. You guys got to get signed up. 4 entries, $25 apiece, $100. You get the 5th entry free. Sign-up deadline is 9 a.m. Sunday the 13th. So get signed up before that. 100% we're giving back of the entry fees. It's a great contest. It's so much fun. Format is simple. You win, you move on.
Still have the STN $50 bonus available for all new STN signups. We just got done with the Kentucky Derby the first week of September here. So from a horse racing standpoint, Authentic was able to pull that upset over 'Tis the Law. They'll now look to Saturday, October 3rd for the Preakness Stakes. So kind of going in a little backwards order here of Belmont to Derby to Preakness. But circle that Saturday, October 3rd on your calendar for the Preakness Stakes, and we'll see Authentic and 'Tis the Law take on each other again, and what we hope is an interesting matchup again there.
Right, I think we can put a teaser out too. I think we're going to do a $15,000 twin Q on that day, so it's great for all the race and sports fans. Remember, again, it's social distancing, limited crowds in the race and sports book, so try to get here early, but open up an STN mobile account. It just makes it so convenient for you guys to wager from the palm of your hand, your living room, wherever you're at, watching the games. It should be a fun weekend. Football kicks off this weekend. I know we're excited. He's Jason McCormick. I'm Chuck Esposito. We'll see you next week on another episode of Bookends.
I was nervous you wouldn't get the plug in there for Last Man